Greetings, MBAP 516 online MBA students. This is Dr. Jaros here with a video explanation for how I graded your first exam. So let's first take a look at question number one. Question number one says, according to our readings, when a CEO is choosing their executive leadership team, there are pros and cons to choosing a team that is demographically diverse. Explain. Well, this answer comes from the Barnard reading. Barnard, Functions of the Executive. He explained what the advantages and disadvantages to having a demographically diverse top management or executive team were. On the positive side, having a demographically diverse executive leadership team is beneficial to the organization because A, it means that the organization is drawing from a larger pool of talent for its executive team than it otherwise would be. Also, that it brings better problem solving and decision making skills to the executive leadership table because people who come from different backgrounds, from diverse backgrounds, tend to bring different perspectives to the table in terms of being able to solve problems. It also improves the motivation and creativity of the leadership team because regardless of your background, you're more likely to believe that you can build a career in the organization and rise up to the executive level. However, there are also some negative or drawback aspects of a demographically diverse leadership team as well. There might be language barriers. If people come from different cultures or different countries where they speak different languages, then there could be a communication issue with respect to language. There might be increased administrative responsibilities that arise from having to manage the process of recruiting and training demographically diverse leaders. There might be a situation where there is confusion or conflict or disagreement among the top management team because, just as having a demographically diverse executive leadership team means that you're bringing more perspectives to bear on a problem or situation, well, people who come from different backgrounds, who have different perspectives, may also be more likely to disagree with each other, making it difficult for the executive leadership team to achieve consensus or unity. All right, let's look at question number two. Question number two says, what is an LPC score and why did Fiedler calculate it for leaders he was studying? Explain. If a leader's LPC score does not match the leadership situation of the organization, what are some things the organization can do about it? Explain. Well, first of all, an LPC score, LPC stands for Least Preferred Coworker. Fiedler administered a survey to the managers that he was trying to study as leaders. He wanted to determine how they felt about the people that they liked best, who they had worked with in the past, and who they had liked least, who they had worked with in the past. The people who a manager had liked least that they had worked with in the past, Fiedler called their least preferred coworker. The reason Fiedler measured this and calculated the least preferred coworker value for the leaders he was studying was because he believed that if a manager described their least preferred coworker in very harsh terms, then that meant that they had an authoritarian style of leadership. In contrast, if a leader described their least preferred coworker in more favorable terms, not as harsh, that meant that they were a more forgiving, democratic, or consideration style of leader. And that was important to Fiedler because that was the whole point of his study. He wanted to determine whether authoritarian, task-oriented leaders or forgiving, consideration, democratic-oriented style leaders were more effective as leaders. So we first had to have a method to categorize managers as one kind of leader or the other, and the least preferred coworker score was the method he used to make that distinction. If a leader's LPC score does not match the leadership of the situation, basically what the organization has to do is either A, find a situation for the leader that fits their style of leadership. In other words, find a situation that fits the task-oriented style or the democratic style, all right? Or the manager or the organization can alter the situation to fit the style of the leader. Like, for example, maybe alter the position power that the leader has, or alter the nature of the task structure that the employees are performing. Because the key thing here is, according to Fiedler, a manager really can't change his or her style. Once a manager's style develops, you can't expect that manager's style to change. So you either have to put the manager in a situation that fits their style, or change the situation so that it fits the manager's style. You can't expect the manager's style itself to change. All right, let's look at question number 3. Explain what the flying saucer study revealed about cognitive dissonance and why it is an important motivational force. The flying saucer study. This was a study conducted by Festinger in his attempt to reveal the existence of cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is a state whereby people hold contradictory thoughts or feelings in their minds. And according to Festinger, if you experience cognitive dissonance, it's an unpleasant feeling, okay? It creates stress and strain and anxiety, and therefore you will be motivated to eliminate that dissonance. That's why cognitive dissonance is a motive force. When we experience it at work, we are motivated to take steps to reduce that dissonance. In the flying saucer study, Festinger studied a group of cultists who believed that, aliens from another planet were going to arrive in a flying saucer and save them before the end of the world. The leaders of the cult had predicted that the flying saucer would arrive to rescue the cult members and take them away from the planet Earth before the Earth was destroyed. Well, of course, the flying saucer never showed up. And so then what that does is, that created cognitive dissonance in the minds of the believers of this cult. Because on the one hand, they really believe in what the cult says, but on the other hand, the flying saucer simply did not show up as predicted by the leaders of the cult. So how did the members of the cult resolve that cognitive dissonance in their own minds? Well, what Festinger found out was it depended on the degree of emotional and social support that the cult members had. Some of the cult members had waited for the flying saucer by themselves, like at their own homes. They hadn't been around any other cult members. And when the time for the flying saucer came and went without it arriving, they experienced this crisis of confidence, this cognitive dissonance, by themselves without anyone around them to support them or be emotionally of benefit to them. These people who lacked social support, they resolved their dissonance by becoming disillusioned with the cult. They were angry at the cult. They felt that the cult had fooled them and deceived them and that it was all a bunch of nonsense. They felt foolish and silly for having ever believed that a flying saucer was going to arrive. And basically, they resolved the dissonance by abandoning the beliefs of the cult. In their mind, the fact that the flying saucer did not occur proved that the cult's beliefs were wrong and were therefore no longer to be believed in. But on the other hand, cult members who had gathered together, like in multiple people in the same house to wait for the flying saucer. Because when the flying saucer failed to arrive, there were several people present, which allowed them to support each other emotionally and socially. They came to a different conclusion. They came to the conclusion that the aliens, the people who are allegedly, flying out there in outer space in the flying saucers had become impressed by their devotion and therefore decided to spare the Earth from cataclysm, and therefore had called off the flying saucer. There was no longer going to be a cataclysm, and so therefore there was no longer a need for a flying saucer to arrive and take the cult members away. So rather than being disillusioned by the cult, these people became even more fanatically devoted to it. They believed that the fact that the flying saucer did not arrive actually reinforced the truths that the cult had been presenting to them. So they responded by becoming even more fanatical and becoming more vocal and more public in their beliefs about the cult. So according to Festinger, the key thing about this study was, number one, first of all, it proved the existence of cognitive dissonance, because whether a cult member was by themselves or around other cult members, when the flying saucer did not arrive, they all experienced dissonance. They all experienced a kind of crisis in confidence with regards to the cult's belief system. But it also revealed that how people will react to dissonance varies depending upon the situation. People who lacked social support responded in one way, resolved their dissonance in one way. People who had social support responded and resolved their dissonance in a very different way. All right, last but not least, question number 4 is about emotional intelligence. What is emotional intelligence, and why is it important for leaders? Explain. Well, first of all, emotional intelligence is about being smart with your feelings. It's different from cognitive intelligence. Usually when we think about intelligence, we think about how smart people are. And when we talk about how smart people are, we're thinking in terms of cognitions, like what kind of logical or reasoning or problem solving or analytical ability someone has. That's what we mean by IQ, or cognitive intelligence. But emotional intelligence is about intelligence related to how one feels. And in the article, Goleman says or argues that emotional intelligence has 5 components. The 5 components are self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skill. These 5 components combine to form someone's emotional intelligence. Of these, social skill is the most important because it allows the individual to put the other 4 components of emotional intelligence to work, so to speak. Why is it important for leaders? Well, Goleman conducted a study. He conducted a study of 188 companies, whereby he studied leaders at all levels of these organizations. And what he found was that leaders who were high in emotional intelligence tended to perform significantly better than leaders who were lower in terms of emotional intelligence. The results of the study showed that emotional intelligence was an important factor in leader effectiveness. Additionally, there were 2 other things he found about emotional intelligence. One was that it tended to increase with age, meaning, as a manager grows older, they become more mature, and that tends to lead to a higher level of emotional intelligence. And also, emotional intelligence is most important at the highest levels of an organization. That is, while emotional intelligence is important for low-level managers like frontline supervisors, it becomes even more important as you rise up the organizational hierarchy, such that at the top level, at like the executive level, it's far and away the most important factor that predicts leader effectiveness. All right. Well, I hope this explanation, provides you with insight about how I graded the exam.